Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California, this is Spiritual Fitness. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today, the Success Sadhana program, where we'll discuss Are You Bored? With your host, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. There are close to 10 members on Zoom and close to 25 members on Facebook watching us. Shweka helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome to another episode of Spiritual Fitness.
Oh, thank you so much, JM, for welcoming me. And thanks everyone for joining in today. It's a topic that is probably universally applicable because it relates to the condition of the mind, boredom, that can overtake anyone in any situation in life. Or we're going to talk about the remedy for that, the permanent remedy, not just distraction. And as we're getting started here, let's take a moment to go into some meditation for a minute or two, because one of the reasons that we do get bored is because we forget about who we are and we just get absorbed in the monotony of our life situation instead of remembering who we are, what we're doing here, and what our purpose is. So one of the ways to overcome that is to become more observant, and we can do that at any time. So let's take a second to sit up a little straighter than we might have been a second ago, and close your eyes and bring your attention to your breath. And just notice that a moment ago, you might not have noticed that you were even breathing. You might have been absorbed in thinking about what you're going to do later or worrying about what might have happened in the past. This is a relief to actually come into the present and just be aware of the aspect of your body that is sustaining all the other cells in your body, and be a little grateful. So take some natural breaths and notice how it's a relief to breathe unrestrictedly. Sometimes we hold our breath and mentally say in as you're inhaling, and mentally say out as you exhale. And relax, but keep an alert mind. And as you're noticing your breathing, be aware that you're the one watching it. You're the watcher or the witness of the body. And the body's going on as a machine. In fact, the lungs are like a bellows. It's mechanical. The air that we're breathing in and out is a substance. It's not us. And let's take a moment to analyze the various elements in the body, just through meditation, as the witnesses of our bodies. Notice that much of the structure of your body is made up of earth, just like in your garden. You can fill up a bucket with earth. It's got minerals, calcium. Similarly, our bones are made of calcium and other elements. Skin. These are all superfluous to us, the conscious being who animates the body and who can witness the body and see that we are independent of the body. Now we'll progress to water. You might feel in your thighs there's a good amount of water. Water flows in rivers, it flows in the ocean, it also flows in our body. It's an element that's separate from us. We can observe it. We're not the water. And now just use your awareness to note that the body has heat. We barely think of it, but it's quite hot, 98.6. It's the fire element. So we've got earth, water, fire, and we already looked at the air. And we have space in between the various organs and molecules in our bodies. It's called ether. And now notice your mind. The mind is the repository for the various images we take in from the world. You might hear or see something, gets recorded in the mind, and it replays the sense, the sounds, tactile experiences. It's all in there. In a jumble. And we take one step higher and go to the intellect, which is above the mind. The intellect moves faster than the mind, it's more subtle than the mind, and it analyzes the information in the mind. And we can watch our intelligence at work, figuring things out, and notice that we're the watchers, we're the witness of our intelligence. In the aggregate, we have earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence. And there's another element, very subtle, called ahankar, or ego, that acts as a connecting cord between us, the conscious being, and the body and the whole external world. But just for a moment, be conscious that you're conscious. Don't try to understand it, just be aware of it. And now, with keeping your eyes closed, behind muted mics in the note of C, we'll chant the mantra Om 3 times. And now the mantra, Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Now just notice the resonance of the sound vibration from the mantras in your solar plexus and anywhere else in your body it's resonated. And bring your awareness back to your breath. You can rub your hands together to create some external sensation and come back into the room. This type of introspection helps us to objectify the body and see that we're separate from it. So one of the ways in which we get a new lease on life is by becoming aware of our existence as a conscious being. How did that go for everybody? If you have any experiences or reflections from the meditation, you can put them right into the chat box. Okay, Wolf gave a heart. And feel free also, at any time you can speak up in the room. And now we're going to show a few slides. Karina's feeling more relaxed. Well, that's good. So hitting the money note. I have a friend who's a musician, a singer and musician, and I was speaking to him recently, and he mentioned this phrase, the money note, when we were discussing musical scales and singing. And I said, what's the money note? And he gave me a brief definition, but I related it to the way in which we can become bored by getting on a plateau and forgetting our range. So here's what a money note is. It's a climatic point of a song, I added in parentheses, or our lives. The singer makes a large interval jump to the song, or to, in our case, our life's higher note. It's a higher note in our life. Let me just share screen for a second, and I'll just give a brief example of what a money note looks like in a situation of somebody singing a song, of what in the music industry it's thought of as. One more time. Ta-da! So my musician friend was telling me that oftentimes the most dramatic part of an opera or in any kind of song that was Broadway, when someone's able to go to a higher scale and then hit the note in such a clear way and hold it, that it moves the audience. And there's a visceral reaction often people have, that this person hit this much higher note. So, as my music teacher was saying, often people don't even know that they have that range. Even some singers don't discover their range until someone guides them to it. We speak oftentimes in a very limited range, and until somebody helps us to train our voice and realize that we can actually hit higher octaves, we don't even know that we're capable of doing that. So in a similar way, in my life, I can become used to a particular way of living, thinking, a perspective, the way I process everything. It's stuck within a certain range. Has anybody ever felt anything like this? That you're confined to a limited range, the way you see things, the way your life goes? Did that happen during the pandemic at all? Let's light up the chat board a little bit. Any responses?
Don, give a thumbs up.
What came up?
Don, give a thumbs up.
Oh, well, that's good. You were shaking your head, Subhadra. What were you thinking?
I was thinking about how I've been afraid to speak up and stand up for myself in a particular situation for a lot of my life. And then recently I was able to be really assertive about it. And since then, I've been feeling free in ways that, like you said, I didn't even know I could feel. And I just feel liberated from that. It felt like a cage.
Wow, that's great. That's a nice correlation to the topic on the money note, because until we make a determination that I'm going to try to find that higher range of my voice or the higher range of my life, and then we get a little guidance how to get up there. But once we hit it, it sounds like, as you're describing, you felt something different in your life, right? Nice.
We have Mala on the chat who says, are you who's asking, are you referring to comfort zone or unwillingness to extend?
Yeah. It's easy to get into a comfort zone, which is really boring because there's not a lot of learning in the comfort zone. Often I've said that when we learn to be comfortable outside our comfort zone and uncomfortable in our comfort zone, that's when we're applying the edge principle. Our lives are a little edgier. We're trying to explore what are the upper limits of my potential and my personality. So I'm just comparing it to the range of our voice. Until you meet a music teacher who can take you through the scales, help you train your voice and get into the higher octaves, then you don't even know they're there. You didn't know it was possible. You just thought it's not possible. I'll just stay comfortable down here. So yes, Mala, be comfortable outside your comfort zone.
Nirali has a comment. I have seen myself limited intellectual capability after 12th grade. Realized I am not all 100%. That was sad, but accepted it. Also have very good imagination and see clearly, which some people take years to come to see same.
Right. Good points. And I might stop at 6th grade or when I get out of high school, or whatever it might be. I mean, just say, okay, I already reached it. That's the pinnacle. Now I go into my normal range and I don't explore what's beyond that. Excellent. Let's look at a few more slides and see where this is taking us. Hopefully somewhere productive. So the ancient wisdom literatures advise us to discover our range. Again, I'm continuing the singing metaphor, but an untrained voice will reach to a certain level and then the voice will be strained. It can't go any higher, but a trained voice can go higher and higher. So we have, says the Bhagavad Gita, other wisdom literatures, much more potential or range than we think. We're caught in a particular perspective, in a range, and take it for granted that this is all that I have and all that there is. But even from common point of view, if you look around and see that there are other entities around us that hear more, they smell more, like dogs, for example. They have an uncanny sense of hearing. When I was a kid, my mother showed us a dog whistle. And when I blew on it, I couldn't hear anything. And I said, this is a broken whistle. And she said, it's not broken. It's a whistle for dogs. They can hear it, but you can't hear it. I didn't believe her. I said, that's impossible. If I can't hear it, nobody can hear it. She said, try it out. So we tried it out, and the dogs next door started barking. They heard it. And I thought, no, that couldn't be. So I tried it again, and they started barking again. They could hear it. So I discovered there was something beyond my range. I used an instrument that my ears weren't attuned to, but others were. And there are numerous examples in the spectrum of light. We only see a tiny part of the spectrum. There's much more to see. There's much more to hear. There's much more to feel. My range of emotions becomes stunted by the circumstances that I'm in now, the way I protect myself, don't open my heart, and so forth. So really, spiritual practice is about discovering our range. We have much more potential, but how do we get there? Let's talk about it a little bit more. Show a couple more slides. I think that'll help. So we started with this exercise. This is the first step in hitting your money note in your life, according to the Bhagavad Gita and the other wisdom literatures, and that is be conscious that you're conscious. We did this exercise. Start to realize that not only are you a conscious entity, but you have a source. This is one of the meditations of being aware that I can be the witness of everything around me, but I'm independent from it. But then I'm not fully independent because I'm being sustained. There's a sustaining force that's giving me intelligence, that's providing my life. So if I connect to that, that's called yoga, the state of yoga, or realizing connection with our original source. Let's come back into the room for just a second. Did you see, is there another comment there in the box?
Yes. Karina says, I had a period of time after the 2009 recession that I felt stuck for a few years mentally, spiritually, and professionally. It wasn't until I decided to take a risk and go back to school that my life began to shift. It truly was due to the love and support of those around me that helped me get there.
Aha. Yes. So there's a practical example of moving out of being stuck, and there are unlimited positions at which I can become stuck. At any point, I can plateau and say, that's it. But we have practically an unlimited range if we identify ourselves as separate from the body. The body is very limited. And if I consider that I am this body, I have a beginning and an end, that's really a limited conception of who I am. And it's kind of scary too, because it doesn't seem right, does it? That why can't I be unlimited? But I become conditioned and think that, well, that's just the way it is. But the wisdom literatures are saying, no, actually, there isn't any beginning or end for you. Just because the body changes doesn't mean you change. In fact, there's a famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita that identifies a wise person as somebody who's aware of the changes of the body, but doesn't become disturbed by them, including when we give up this present body, which we're actually doing all the time. Even the cells in the brain eventually get replaced, even in this lifetime. So the body's turning over from one body to the next. It's constant. We're constantly sloughing off the material body, and we are then getting accustomed to the new body. What else, JM?
Yeah, Jose, who just posted, is the capacity to recursively introspect on one's own subjective experience labeled in Sanskrit or scientifically
Yeah, it's called, in general, it's called introspection in English, and in Sanskrit it's called dhyan. Dhyan means to contemplate one's higher self and the source of oneself. And so it's a practice to fix the mind. And it takes practice because the mind's so used to running off to Home Depot to buy something else. I got to go somewhere. I got to do something. I got to produce something. But why do you have to produce so much when you already are something? Can't you just sit there for a minute and notice that you're something really profound? And that when we notice that actually every situation in my life is completely unique. See, boredom comes from this idea of monotony, that everything's the same as it ever was. But that's illusory because nothing's ever the same as it ever was. The body's not the same. There's no sunset or sunrise that's the same as another. There's no particle anywhere in the universe that's the same as another, identical. Identical twins. I hate to tell you all this, but they're not identical. I know a lot of identical, not a lot. I know a few identical twins, and they're very different. And those who know them well know the difference between them. So in a sense, if you just think about how unique everything is, it's amazing. It's not boring, it's amazing. So let's look at one or two more slides. Because there's more stuff in here to look at related to the practices of yoga and meditation, spiritual practices. So the very beginning of awakened consciousness, it's called Brahma-bhuta. Brahma means understanding. We are by nature spiritual. We're not the elements of the body, as we already reviewed at the beginning. We're something separate from them. And Brahma-bhuta means to become aware of our spiritual nature. And this is the beginning of hitting the money note. I discover I actually have a much higher range than I thought I had. I get absorbed in the normal range of life and I think, humdrum, I got to survive in this world. And that's all there is. And it's just miserable, actually. There's not really a huge prospect for me because I have to work hard, then die. So that's a really limited range. But in the Brahma-bhuta, on that scale, it's a higher conception, understanding that actually I'm not my body. I'm something separate. And that something has characteristics. Three of the characteristics that come into the being that come into being in the life of someone who's hitting this spiritual money note are a joy, feel joyful for no apparent reason. It's not because I won something. It's because I feel that way constantly. And satisfaction. Satisfaction is epitomized by the word enough. I have enough right now. I don't need more. I'm satisfied in what I am right now. Whatever's around me, that's enough. And non-envious, that's the third characteristic of someone who's touching the web of spiritual consciousness, is feeling non-envious. It stands to reason because when I'm satisfied, why would I envy anybody else? If I have enough and I don't look at somebody else's stuff or talents or luck, apparent luck, and say, oh, why did they get it? Why not me? And the origin of envy is the misconception that I'm the physical body, because the physical body and mind is never enough. And it doesn't matter if it's a good idea, but it doesn't matter if you eat all organic food, take all the right supplements, exercise. Even then, if I haven't left that particular range on the scale, and gone to touch the Brahma-bhuta, I'll still feel envious of others because there's going to be somebody who has a better body, a better diet, better luck than me. But when I touch the spiritual platform, non-envious. I don't feel envy towards other humans, other animals, and so forth, because I realize that everyone is actually a spiritual entity having an experience here in this material world. So this in Sanskrit, it's called Brahma-bhuta. And the verse goes, Brahma-bhuta prasannatma na shochati na kangshati samak sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. Let's go back into the room and see if anybody wants to converse. On your marks, get set, converse. You can say anything or put in the chat. The easiest way is just to reflect back anything you heard or ask a question that'll expand the conversation.
Sundar posted a reflection. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Wolf.
If I may, so why there is a conflict between the peacefulness enough or peaceful enough and constant drive to accumulate and to get more and better? So there is a big delta between the Bhagavad Gita teachings and societal standards and drivers across the globe, not just in the US. Please.
Yeah, good point, Wolf. There's a way in which when I slide out of Brahma-bhuta consciousness, I don't take time for my spiritual practice. Then I come on to the platform, it's called Jada Buddhi. I get a dull consciousness because I think I'm my body. That's boring. It's not only boring, but it's also just a cause of stress, thinking, yes, I am this body. And then it spreads to the whole society, and all the institutions get centered around the idea that survival of the body or comfort of the body in more affluent societies is the all in all. And this becomes the norm. It's built into all the systems. And so forgetfulness of my spiritual nature is the cause of anxiety and also boredom and so forth. And why is there such a big gap? Because it's not inculcated. However, for those who take the time to train themselves to and take help from a music teacher to go to the higher scales, they can rise above the Jada Buddhi or the material consciousness and actually come to the spiritual platform and hit their money note. So it's much needed, of course, in the world today. And oftentimes it's overlooked. But you can't eat nuts and bolts. My guru used to say that you can produce all kinds of fancy things. You can't eat it. And not only that, it ultimately is only an extension of the consciousness we're in now. So we have to find the higher octaves.
Yeah, I feel like being a toddler at 55, because everything that I knew before either not important or irrelevant. But attending to this healthy addiction every Friday at noon, I move into a conscious incompetence territory. Now I know what I don't know. But it's like, is it too late in life? Because all this energy and time wasted.
Actually, the first symptom of spiritual advancement is thinking, oh goodness, I wasted too much time. It's a particular attitude. It's called avyarta kalatvam. This is mentioned by the great teacher of Bhakti Yoga, Chaitanya, 500 years ago. So he listed the various symptoms of spiritual advancement. And one of them is what you're experiencing, called avyarta kalatvam, which means, why did I waste so much time? But no, it's never too late, because we're in a continuum. And wherever we start, it's beneficial, because we can actually gather up from all our previous experiences in life and have something to compare it with. I could say that I know sometimes people, they're born into a family that's very oriented towards spiritual practice, even they can take that for granted though, because yeah, that's just my upbringing. It's not me. But when even later in life, you get an opportunity to take it up, then the main point is that you make your independent choice that I'm going to invest in this. And when you have that awakening of consciousness, that's when you start, and it's never too late.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wolf.
I feel better now.
Me too. And I'm right there with you.
A couple of more on the chat. Before that, I just want to take a quick announcement. Next week, Vaish is traveling, so we don't have the spiritual fitness class next week. So we'll continue the following week, which is July 2nd on Friday. But meanwhile, we do, as I mentioned, we do have Bhakti Circle program, which is a weekly meetup where individuals come together and discuss the topic. We had one yesterday, which was well received. So next week on Thursday at 5:30 p.m., Thursday Pacific time, we have the third session. We have had 2 sessions so far. The third one is consciousness, the missing link. So we'll discuss that. It's in groups, in small groups. So typically we watch a video of the subject, then we break out rooms into 4 or 5 people, and there are a set of questions that we discuss and learn from each other. So it's very fun. People have found it very fun. So in case you're interested, please do register at hi@vaisheshikadas.com, send an email and you'll be registered. So again, next week, Thursday, June 24, 5:30 p.m., Bhakti Circle. And we do not have the regular Friday program next week. So just want to quickly mention that.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And sorry for having to travel. I actually look forward to this every week. Okay, what else?
Yeah, so we have a couple of more. Sundar made a point. I like the point you mentioned in the previous talks about how we can take small incremental steps to go out of our comfort zone, go out and touch the pavement.
Yeah, definitely. Otherwise, it's a little too jarring. It's just like training your voice. There's a lot of exercises. You start at a lower octave, and then you practice over and over again to gradually move up the scale in one tone, or not in different levels of pitch, and it strengthens the voice and also your confidence. And there's also a way in which your voice adapts to the higher tones. And so, in the same way, we have to start off with some spiritual practice in our life in order to notice that we have more capacity. There's nothing succeeds like success. And we have to get some direct experience that I moved a little bit. I made some improvement. Otherwise, a spiritual practice just becomes sentiment. Either that, it becomes mental speculation. It's just dry. So taking up a practice that you can experience it directly for yourself, that I made a little improvement. I noticed some strength. This is called yoga balena. I got some strength from my yoga practice that gave me the wherewithal to go to a higher pitch. I rose above some of the things that I normally wouldn't have been able to. And where did it come from? And we'll triangulate and come back to our practice and notice, wow, this is actually helping me. So that's important. What else, JM?
So we have, I think, I don't know the name, but it starts with SC. Which comes first, the desire to meditate to reach Brahma-bhuta or the feeling of contentment?
Well, generally there's a desire. So Chaitanya described it as a gardening proposition. And so oftentimes he said it starts by meeting somebody who already is hitting that money note in his or her life. They go, wow, how did you do that? I want to hit that note also. And it instills in us a desire to want to try it. And then from there, we start a practice to get up to that level. So in the garden, I'm mixing metaphors here, I know, back and forth. But in Chaitanya's teachings, he compared to a garden. The seed gets planted by some association, and with a person who's got seeds to offer you, good seeds, and you notice, wow, this person grew a nice garden. These are the same seeds. Let me try. And then the watering, he said, of the garden is the practice. And if you water your garden properly, and make sure to take out the weeds too. That's another part that he taught. Take out weeds because they look just like the seeds that you planted, that you intended to plant. The weeds come up and you might not know at first that they're not the real thing, but you have to be able to identify them and take them out so they don't crowd out your garden. Let's see a couple more slides. There's a few more points here and then we'll come back to the board. So the next is shed the weight that holds you back. It's actually part of the singing technique is to shed weight, because there's a way in which when a novice singer begins to move up the scale and go a little bit beyond his or her range, the voice tenses up. So singing coaches call this shedding the weight. It means if you actually learn to relax, and they give you exercises when you're doing the notes so that it relaxes your throat muscles, so that as you're going up the scale, you can shed the weight of clenching and holding on. And there are several ways to shed weight. Let's look at them in the extended metaphor and spiritual practice. And we talked about these in developing the superpowers, but here are some things to shed. Grudges. Grudges are like holding a little vicious wolverine under your shoulder, under your arm all day long, carrying it around and feeding it. I want to maintain this grudge. So you can shed that and let it go. Next is unnecessary speech. This is highly productive for making spiritual advancement, or actually advancement in any sphere. If you refine your speech, be careful what you say. First of all, don't say everything that's on your mind. Notice that your mind comes up with all kinds of stupid stuff to say, but you're not obligated to say it. And notice the difference when you don't say it. And you can actually calculate, what if I had said that? What would have happened? There's a consequence to everything we say. So yoga begins with our speech. So shed unnecessary speech. Next is distraction. You have to be tactical about this. Go through your life and make a list of all the places where you're getting distracted. And then systematically remove the distractions. You'll be happy. Happiness comes from, it's a simple thing. Remove the distractions. You can do it. Next is pretense. Don't pretend to be somebody you're not. The opposite is sincere, which means without wax. In the marble industry, when there's a crack, the cheaters fill it in with wax and then sell it as high-grade marble. But then it leaks out when the weather gets hot. But so the word sincere means without wax. Don't try to cover up your where you're lacking. Otherwise, you won't be able to fix it. So be careful of pretense. You can shed that and just be real. And next is give up a hope for a better past. Don't dwell on the past. Doesn't matter what happened in the past. It matters what you're doing right now. And shed procrastination. And one of the ways to do that is to be very clear on what your purpose is and take small steps towards it. So these are things to shed. Shed the weight that's holding you back from hitting your money note. And finally, feel thrilled about waking up to a new day every day. Thrilled, actually thrilled, feel thrilled to get up. So here are some ways that you can feel thrilled when you get up every single day. And it's not just in the morning, but throughout the day. But it's sort of indicative of where our consciousness is when we come out of sleep and then we become aware. It's like, oh no, same thing every day. Why do I even bother? So first of all is know your priorities by heart. I added that on, by heart. Memorize them. If somebody wakes you up at 1 a.m. and says, what are your priorities? You should be able to just immediately say, here are my priorities. Try that. Even if you have 3 or 4, try that on for size, and you'll notice that just by that one exercise, as knowing your priorities by heart, you'll feel invigorated in your life. The next is to pay yourself first. Just like in sound economic advice, there's an old book called The Richest Man in Babylon. It was really commonsensical advice about how to develop material wealth, financial wealth. And so the direction is pay yourself first. You're paying all these other bills, but you should take out 10% of your gross income and pay yourself. Don't spend it, invest it. And so it's the same thing in spiritual practice. At least 10% of your day, you're giving it to everybody else. You're working on this, that. Take 10% of your 24 hours and invest it in your own spiritual practice. Next is face your fears. You can also catalog those and notice that if you face them, they disappear. Or there's ways in which to deal with them, overcome them, because oftentimes that's what holds us back into a mediocre life. And finally, knowledge and practice. Humans are unique in this sense, is that we can get new knowledge and then institute a practice in our life so that we can go to a higher range. Anybody can do it. Doesn't mean you have to go as high as anybody else, because we can develop our capacity, but knowledge and practice are precious to us as humans because both of them are available. Okay, let's take some reflections. Anything that you heard that stuck in your mind that sound like something you could take away in your pocket and pull it out later and use it. What sounded usable to you all?
Can I add something, please?
Oh, yes, please.
So I heard somebody was saying that they think that they may have lost some time in this life, that they were not thinking about the spiritual awakening. And sometimes, I don't know, after 40, 50, people think, oh yeah, I have lost this time. So I feel like if we just open our eyes and just think about it, we haven't lost any time. No time has lost. No time will be lost from now. So we have the time of infinity. So when we know we are a spiritual being, then there is like day-to-day rush, just going after things, thinking that we are behind. It's just meaningless. So it's just, we just open our eyes and get aware of, okay, we have this infinity time. There is nothing to rush. That's all I think that, no, I haven't lost any time. I will not lose any time because I am myself, not this body. And I have, if I cannot finish something in this life, always there are more life to come. So that's all I wanted to say.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a very helpful point. We have other opportunities. There are a few stories given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. One of them is about a king named Bharat, who was very serious yogi. He, in fact, gave up his kingdom. He decided that now's the time in my life when I'm going to go for it. So he went off by himself to the forest. That's not required of us in bhakti yoga. But at that time, he was practicing a particular kind of yoga that was very austere. He gave up everything and lived very simply by a calm, tranquil, sacred river. He used to do his meditations every day, and he lived in the wilderness. And then he got distracted one day because a lion was chasing after a deer, and the deer was pregnant. It jumped across the water to get away from the lion and miscarried, and a little fawn came out into the water, and then the mother deer died out of fear. And the fawn was there imperiled by being carried away by the water. So the king, former king, jumped up out of his meditation, ran over, saved the fawn, and then he became so attached to the fawn that he forgot about his meditation. And then he became completely distracted from his practice. So he took 2 more lives in order to perfect his practice. What do you think his next life was after he was a king? Miriam? Just guess.
Just trying to think. That's a good question.
Okay, I'll give you a hint. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned that whatever you're fully absorbed in when you leave this body, that's the direction you'll go. That's what the accommodation will be for your next body.
Maybe a deer.
Yeah. So he was a deer, but he also had awareness that he had been a king, he had been a meditator, and then he blew it, basically. And then he took the birth of a deer. And then the third one was, he was born in a very advanced spiritual family, but when he was born there, he was still aware of his journey. So he pretended like he was a complete fool because he didn't want to interact with the world. And he attained perfection in that life. But one of the points is we're on a continuum. There are other lives, but it can be precarious also. So there's a sense of urgency that as soon as you have the idea, as you said, Miriam, as soon as you know, take advantage of it as quickly as possible, because we don't know how much time we have. And also, it's a lot of struggle. I know, going to kindergarten and growing up into the grammar school, and who knows, which situation we'll be in or what the condition of the world on earth will be like, and so forth. These are, anyway, very interesting topics because we have a beginning and an end in this life. And, how much can we take advantage of it while we have the chance? What else, JM?
Daisy makes a point. We are like soil. What we plant within us is what we will grow. How much dedication we put into something will reflect how much we blossom. We decide how much we aspire to ascend.
Oh, nice, Daisy, continuing the gardening metaphor. It's so helpful, isn't it, that metaphor? Because gardening requires science and also tender loving care of the plants and so forth. There's an old saying that the best fertilizer is the gardener's shadow. It means when you show up for it, for the plants, you'll notice things and be able to help them in certain ways. So same thing with spiritual practice. Excellent.
We have, I don't know the full name, it starts with AN. What I found useful: shed unnecessary speech. I feel that working corporate places, we are encouraged to always speak up, share our opinions, etc., which then becomes a habit. And we do it in our personal lives as well. I feel compelled at times to give opinions or point out mistakes, opportunities for improvements.
Wolf's clapping. Why did you like that, Wolf?
Because that's a reality that of the corporate world, and it's a inner conflict between who I am or who we are versus what is expected. If you're quiet, therefore you're passive, you're not aggressive, you don't care, you don't understand what they're talking about, and so that's based on the assumptions. If your mouse is always moving, then you become a highly valuable asset on a team. So it's a nonsensical comparison and disturbing delta or disturbing difference between who we are spiritually and who we're perceived to be by our teams.
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah, it creates a little cognitive dissonance. Also, yeah, please go ahead.
No, that's it. Thank you.
Oh, okay. And explain my position, and that is not to become silent necessarily. And I know that's not what you're saying, Wolf, but also to be more strategic in speaking. Just think about it before saying, because when there's this gap between what I say and why I'm saying it, I'm considering it more with my intelligence. Is it helpful, useful, true? So a lot of times I'll get information and then I just want to pass it on to somebody else, especially bad news. Like, hey, did you hear? Like, what is the use of bringing it up? How's it going to do anybody any good? If I consider it, maybe it is important, but maybe it's not. And so being strategic and selective about what I say, just that little bit, it's subtle. It might not even be noticed at the corporate level. It might even be more helpful. It could be also a process of self-realization, because you're noticing the difference between what your thoughts are and what you're willing to put out through your vocal cords.
Shubhadra has a question.
Good.
How do we move a priority from the intellectual level to a strong desire?
Well, isn't that a good question? Well, play with it for a while. When you start looking at your life and examining your intentions and your purposes, it's a very powerful kind of meditation, because as Socrates said, the unexamined life isn't worth living. And so just don't pressure yourself too much, but do examine and see, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Just asking yourself, that's the Socratic method, is just ask questions of yourself and say, why am I doing this? And I was thinking about the whole process of speaking anyway. I mean, I can speak English to a certain degree, but I take it for granted. I don't think about the grammar when I'm saying it. I don't, I do sometimes, making sure that hopefully that I'm saying it in a comprehensible way. But there's a way I can take everything for granted in my life. I just do it by rote. I learned to speak English by listening to my parents when I was a kid, but I don't really think about it anymore. Can I improve it? Why am I speaking? What is language anyway? And when you start looking at your life and thinking about all its different components, say, why am I doing these things? Then it'll rise to a higher level of awareness that I can be deliberate about it. So I always recommend write it down. Take time to yourself to write it down, and then rearrange it on paper and say, across this one out, moving up to the higher level. And when you start to do that, it manifests more in your consciousness. And whatever manifests in your consciousness, it's possible then to take it up as a practice. You might then, how do I make this a priority? And there's lots of ways to do that. And that's how we can harmonize our desires and our spiritual intentions with the reality that we have a material body that we have to cooperate with. Let's take one last point, JM, and then.
Sure. I don't know, somebody wanted to come in, I thought. Yeah,
Yes.
Go ahead.
We've got MGD all the way from Canada.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the wonderful talk. I was just appreciating the point that you were mentioning regarding the Brahma-bhuta, that we can actually, the reason why there is insecurity and why there is envy is because when we identify with the body and the mind, it's always takes us to the position of where we always feel it's not enough for us. But only when we identify ourselves on the spiritual platform, then we can be satisfied. So,
yeah. It's a foregone conclusion. As soon as I identify that I am the body or mind, I'm going to feel envy. I'm going to also feel insufficient, because we're subtler than the body and the mind, and we really can't appreciate it on a very deep level. It has its major limitations for us, and we feel incomplete. But when we identify ourselves and connect ourselves to the higher spiritual plane that's as subtle as us or subtler, then we feel amazed by it. and we feel overwhelming satisfaction, if there is such a thing. And there is. These are all described as experiences we can have. And there are practices through which we can do that. Just as in singing, there's a way to go to the higher ranges and examine the ranges of our voice. It's not a perfect metaphor because, in singing, it's muscular and technical how we can do it. There are some aspects of that, the practice of spiritual life, but we're categorically different from the material world. And it's not a matter of getting anything new. We already are spiritual. It's just a matter of realizing it. However, and this is my last sentence, I hope, when we find the practice and we hit the money note in the course of our spiritual practice, we'll feel satisfaction, and other people will notice in us too, will notice that we're hitting that note as well, and they'll become interested in it too. Period. I think I made it in one sentence, no semicolons even. Well, thank you very much, JM, for holding our group together. And I'm deeply grateful to all of you for joining in for this spiritual fitness session. And yogis who live high in the Himalayas, sometimes when they come out of their caves, they see other yogis walking on the high paths of the Himalayas, going to get some roots to bring back to their cave. And they see each other, and there's a phrase they say, which means keep the transcendental vibration going. It goes like this: Hari Bol. So since we're all in a cave-like existence here in Zoom,
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Haribol.
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 Haribol. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.